Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, it's Cynicalex, and today we're going to do another ranking of the top 10 best characters for every CTP. Now, as always with these kind of ranking videos, it's just my opinion. You're more than welcome to play every character and every CTP the way that you want, but now is a great time to reconsider your placement of CTPs if you have them equipped and not in your inventory, because there is a 50% off discount. That's why myself, Godzillanator, and other content creators are making these videos right now. So without further ado, we're going to jump in. We're going to try to keep the same order as we did for the last video 2 months ago in May, but we might mix it up a little bit. So I'm going to refer to the ranking from 2 months ago in May for some of these, because some of them haven't really changed much. Although we've gotten like a dozen new uniforms, which basically means a dozen new characters, some of them just haven't come out and been good for a CTP of Insight. Or for CTPs, in this case CTP of Insight, which is what we're starting off with first. So the difference between last month or last time and this time is really just one character. We have Proxima instead of Thing there at the bottom, and that is just basically because there haven't been a lot of good support characters. You could still argue that Ebony is a good character to use an Insight for, but he's also a much better standalone character in my opinion, and a lot easier to play than Proxima in my opinion. So that's why I didn't put him on this list, but you definitely could. But you wouldn't want to double dip. If you're going to use Ebony and Colossus on the same PvP team for support, you don't need an Insight for each of them, so just bear that in mind for your own sort of valuations. But otherwise, the CTP of Insight list is exactly the same. Colossus, Phylavel, all the way down. The only thing I did was swap Baron Zemo's uniform, his look, because he's exactly the same, unfortunately. After the Insight, we actually go with Greed next, and just like Insight, Greed really has not changed that much, but I did swap around a couple of characters. I took Deadpool and I took Captain America off the list altogether, and I also wanted to recognize the fact, on top of adding Captain Marvel to this list, who I think is a decent option, I wanted to recognize the fact that some players do use Agreed on Sentry. Now, it's not the best option, it's not even the second best option in my opinion, but if you don't have a Rage to give him, you don't have an Energy, you don't have a Regen, and you still want him to be kind of useful, so you don't want to give him an Authority, maybe Greed is the best option. So I wanted to recognize that by putting it there, but still, Greed is one of the CTPs that doesn't have a lot of good options. Basically, Jean Grey is one of the only good options. Everybody else after that is kind of iffy. That's why there is that placeholder for second place, because it's not an optimal CTP for any character. So just keep that in mind. If you're just going around slapping Greeds on people, you might end up regretting your decision. Keep in mind with reforaging now and the fact that you can get more CTPs for free, you may just want to hang on to these and then chuck them at a reforage for a Mighty Energy or a Mighty Judgment or something like that somewhere down the line. I'm not sure if that's what you want to do. I'm just saying that's a possibility, and you know, it's not the worst thing to do, rather than equipping on a character, not using the character, and then spending 300 crystals to take it off when the character inevitably gets a uniform. Next up, we're going to quickly cover Patience and Transcendence. There really is not much to say about these CTPs, despite the fact that Transcendence is really popular, which is really sad. It's like almost always top 3 CTPs for any character, which is honestly tragic because it's such a bad CTP. I just feel that a lot of players get them a lot, like frequently, a lot more often than other CTPs, so they think, you know what, this is my only CTP, I'm just gonna throw it on a character. So yeah, for CTP of Transcendence and Patience, the list is exactly the same. Thankfully, we haven't gotten any new characters that suit the CTP of Transcendence or Patience. These are bad CTPs. These are very low power level you know, this is like equipping a baseball bat when other players are running around with samurai swords and chainsaws and bazookas. It's just not on the same level. You know, maybe if they rework the CTPs, that'll be a different story, but for now, these are sort of the lower tier CTPs meant to sort of dilute the pool of CTPs, so you're not always pulling a really good one. And so, you know, unless they rework them, in case of that, that would be a different story. But otherwise, I genuinely hope we don't see a change in these lists here of Moon Girl to Ultron. The only reason why this list would actually change is if any one of these characters got reworked. So actually, I do hope this list changes, and hopefully this list changes to the point where I just never have to do it, you know, make a list again for it, because none of the characters are good for it. Anywho, moving on to the CTP of Judgment. This one I think had one of the biggest upheavals from the last few updates. We got a lot of really good characters, Supergiant, Ebony Maw, etc. that are very, very good with the CTP of Judgment. And we also just had a bit of a shift in the meta as far as the best characters. Falcon giving Rogue some competition really does reevaluate her position on the CTP of Judgment's chart. So she moves down, whereas Mephisto and Supergiant move up. I put Mephisto at the top there because he really struggles for pretty much all content unless you give him, I mean, he doesn't struggle. I'm not saying he's a bad character. I'm just saying that any other CTP that you give Mephisto, even a Rage, really just doesn't tap into his power properly. Like, you can give Supergiant a Rage for ABX, and it's not the worst option, but it's similar to a Judgment. But for whatever reason, it's not for Mephisto. He just does not perform with a Rage versus a Judgment. So you really want to give him one, especially if you're going to build him up. You're going to want to save a Judgment for him, but then you still got the staples, you know, with Supergiant coming next, and Rogue, Human Torch, and Scarlet Witch. I put Scarlet Witch below Human Torch because she can flexibly use a Rage. Scarlet Witch is kind of 50-50 Rage and Judgment, whereas Human Torch kind of needs the Judgment. He can't really work as well with a Rage. And then you've still got Ghost Rider, Luna Snow there, and then I also added Ebony. He's honestly a solid pick. He's not necessarily a better character than Luna for most content, but again, Luna is going to excel with a Rage. You're only really going to get comparable value for Luna if you give her a Mighty Judgment or a Brilliant Judgment to be able to keep up with the ABX performance. She doesn't have a lot of value outside of ABX right now, so that is why I would recommend, like, I'll put her higher on the Rage scale and lower on the Judgment scale, just because I'm not considering reforging them, and so because of that, she sort of doesn't score as high as other characters do. Moving along to the CTP of Energy. Very, very hot CTP. Lots of changes here as well from 2 months ago to now. Gambit is gone off the list. Iron Man is gone off the list. Deadpool is gone off the list. I know. And Cable gets a facelift. So I made the distinction this time around. Cable keeps his spot at number 6, but I made the distinction that it has to be the summer. It should be the Summer Days uniform. So I wanted to apologize for not doing that last time. I really should have. But essentially, if you only have the X of Swords Kid Cable, the newest one, the one that I use, you should probably give your Cable a Rage. Energy is going to be a lot more difficult. You can still make it work with Energy, for sure. You can do, you know, 2 cancel 3, cancel 4, cancel 5. But it's not quite as good as a Rage would be. The rotation's a little bit too tight. So Summer Days Cable plays much like the original Cable does. And so because of that, it's something that benefits more from a Rage. So consider the uniform for Cable when you're considering the CTP. The first 3 slots stay exactly the same. Sharon, Moonstone, and Null, just amazing. But then Falcon and Black Dwarf are actually so good. Sorry, not Falcon. Captain America and Black Dwarf are so good. It is insane. So I had to put them on this list. And then I also put in Corvus because of his value as a speed villain who can double, and he can get you a very competitive score in ABX and also be very good for pushing the villain stages in World Boss Legend, and he can double for Null and Mephisto because of the type advantage. So the type advantage is huge there, so I really had to highlight him over someone like Gambit or someone else. Gambit has a lot of synergy with an energy, but Corvus is just going to make that energy go so much further for you in 3 separate boss modes, right? Null, Mephisto, well, any other regular World Boss Ultimate, and ABX, whereas Gambit is not going to be able to go as far for you, and he won't be able to touch anything in ABX. So yeah, the energy one did shake up quite a bit, but it's still, you know, held down solidly by Sharon, Moonstone, and Longhair Don't Care. No. Moving on to the egg, I probably should have bunched up all of the subpar CTPs together, but yeah, basically this one here, the only thing I did was I updated the Cull Obsidian, the Black Dwarf icon, and then I substituted in Elsa for Quasar, because Quasar was originally a suggestion here, but Quasar is way too good for an egg. Honestly, guys, you shouldn't be equipping these CTPs on any character unless you have a glut, like you have a major excess of CTPs. If you're a player who spends just a little bit here and there and you get eggs, just save them and then use them for reforging later. I know it sounds outrageous, but none of these characters you're giving an egg to are really going to perform at a high level. This is just going to stretch their reflect values a little bit further, like it is for Destroyer, like it is for Colossus, but I honestly don't think it is worthwhile. So yeah, I put the characters here, but again, that second spot is occupied by none because it's not really worth. You're better off cracking the egg than you are cooking the egg, if you know what I mean. Moving on to the CTP of Destruction. This one actually got a bigger change than I was expecting. So we actually moved around a few characters on this list. Carol stays number 1 with the new uniform, but actually Yelena now comes in and bumps Vision because Yelena is so good for PvE and PvP content. It's really hard to reject the value of destruction there. She's very similar to Vision in that regard, but she can also jump into PvP, whereas Vision cannot. So she has to bump him on the spot there. Otherwise, the list is identical. So two things changed. Basically 0 things changed. It was the order of things, but it seemed like a lot, despite the fact that I'm almost never using a destruction, and very few people are talking about destruction. Moving on to the CTP of Authority. This one also changed a little bit at the bottom. This is sort of how it is in PvP. There is an established meta, and so if you're not talking about those 6 characters, if there isn't a crack in that top 6 position, Silver Surfer down to Hulk, then there's really nothing to say about those positions. They're going to be exactly the same. It's only going to be the ones at the bottom that are sort of shifting as characters get a little bit stronger than counterparts there. So Thanos gets dumped, Doctor Strange and Invisible Woman get dumped, and then you have new characters moving in. So you've got Blue Marvel moving in, you've got Supergiant moving in, and you've got Spectre moving in. Again, these are not top tier PvP picks, but they are definitely a lot better than some people give them credit for, and they can win you Alliance Conquest fights, they can win you PvP fights. If you want to try something off meta, they are definitely a lot better than someone might expect, and they can catch your opponents off guard and get you some spicy wins. I think we are almost done, if I'm not mistaken. We just have 2 more left. We have Regen and Rage. So let's go ahead and start off with Regen here. Regen, the premier PvP CTP. This one, again, didn't change much. It's just the bottom that changes. So I dropped Null and I dropped Thanos because they're just not seeing any play in PvP besides Alliance Conquest. And then I added in Captain Marvel and Blue Marvel based on their performance and based on what I've heard from other players. Blue Marvel, a powerhouse for Alliance Tournament, so has to be represented there in some regard. And then Captain Marvel is going to be not only good for one-on-one PvP, but she's amazing for AC. Anytime you see an all-villain Alliance Conquest team, she can just go in there and wipe them out because of that crazy uniform villain buff. There's just no question. She has Eye from Ignore. They can't hide from her. So a Regen is going to make her super tanky. Again, you could argue for Destruction or Regen, but that's why she's low on the Regen list, but definitely deserves to be there. And then finally, the CTP that actually saw the most change of them all, Rage. Now, this partially has to do with the fact that Odin's value has decreased quite a bit recently. Not only have new characters come in who can utilize a Rage better than he does, not only has that happened, but you've also just had characters take spots of his without needing a Rage, like Scarlet Witch with the Judgement and ABX, so on and so forth. So Odin actually takes a big tumble from number 1 down to number 4. You also have Luna moving up here. You have Ghost Rider moving up. You have Corvus coming in. You have Captain Marvel coming in, who wasn't there before because she's now number 1 for squad battle. And then you actually have Doctor Strange dropping a lot from 4th all the way down to 10th. The reason why Doctor Strange is still there is because he just doesn't work with any other CTP. It's really just like Rage or Bust, or maybe just you could give him an insight at this point if you wanted to. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that most veterans are not using Doctor Strange for endgame content as a standalone character. They're using him just for the leadership, but it's just really difficult to make any kind of build work with Doctor Strange besides the Rage because of the skill spam. So it's sort of interesting that he, keeps his spot due to his inability to use other CTPs. He may not actually be the 10th best option for a Rage, but if you have 10 CTPs of Rage sitting around, you can probably make a pretty informed decision on that. I also completely dropped Professor X off this list. Judgment and Rage are pretty similar for him, but I don't think either one is really going to push him into a top 10 conversation anyways. There are just 10 better characters no matter which one you talk about. So yeah, if he wasn't going to be on the Judgment list, he wasn't really going to be on the Rage list, excuse me. But you can also see a lot of overlap. So this is something that I just want to cover at the end here quickly. There is a lot of overlap lately with Rage and Judgment, and it can be difficult at times, especially for elemental characters, to figure out which one is better. So I'll try to summarize it the way that I've understood it. This is not the case for every single elemental character, but for a lot of them, let's say Supergiant, really good example. Judgment is going to generally be better for Supergiant or Rogue, etc. when you're talking about World Boss content, whether it's World Boss Ultimate or World Boss Legend. A Rage for Rogue, for Supergiant, for maybe Ebony is going to generally be better for ABX. Only when you can reforge your Judgment into a Mighty or a Brilliant is it going to actually replace Rage altogether. Again, there can be some debate on this depending on how much Pierce you have, but I would say for the vast majority of players, it's a decent rule of thumb. If you want to use Apocalypse and ABX and you don't have any reforging capabilities, I'd say go with a Rage. If you really just want to use Human Torch and World Boss Legend, definitely go for a Judgment, not a Rage, you know, despite the fact that they both have those similar 5 seconds on type procs. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Let me know what you think of the top 10 ranking for all of the CTPs. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.